The first time around, we looked at the results of the beta from the DPS perspective. We looked at the first few bosses testable, so now it's time to go and look at the healers. This is also because when it comes to the beta, we have gotten some balance tuning, so we could be continuing to go and look at more and more bosses from a DPS perspective, but it doesn't hold much value anymore because, for example, Fire Mage has just been nerfed, Unholy has just been nerfed, Destruction and Demo have also been nerfed, so many of the results of the DPS have pretty much already changed, even if we continue and go and look at their results. Whereas when it comes to healers, things are more stable. They are more stable because the number one main change was the nerf to Holy Paladin, to the Dawn Light hero talent of Holy Paladin. So besides that, most of the other things when it came to healers have remained unchanged. So it's still worthwhile to go and look at how they did in the beta. Now, the number one disclaimer worth pointing out is that the better performer overall, if we exclude the overpoweredness of the hero talent of Holy Paladin, was Mistweaver Monk, which overall did the best in the results. Now, the disclaimer as to what caused Mistweaver to do this well, because practically they are still playing very similar to before. Your two most used and played abilities are going to be your Enveloping Mist and Vivify, with the spreading around of your Renewing Mist, even in the War Within, same as, current Dragonflight season. It's not really changing that much. There are sure a few things, like for example now you no longer need to help you nearly as much with Soothing Mist in order to get your insta cast spam of Vivifies, so you can spread and splash AoE healing with Invigorating Mist. Now you can also do it without directly channeling Soothing Mist yourself, and you can still get your Invigorating Mist AoE healing. Your talent tree has remained almost the same. You've gotten one talent discount for Dancing Mist and the Clouded Focus talent being removed. So practically now you have 2 more talent points worth spending in your tree. But the major difference as to why Mistweaver is doing so well, considering nothing has changed, is the mana. Because if there is one other thing Mistweaver has gotten, which you already have in live as well, is Mana Tea. The whole gaining stacks of Mana Tea that you can then consume to gain mana, and then on top of that gain a 30% mana discount. That has proven to be extremely powerful in the beta. Because when it comes to other healers other than a Monk, for example an Evoker, right? This is a 6-minute fight. The Evoker was doing pretty good healing, well over 1 million HPS, which is very high in the beta. If you look at the resources and of the Evoker's mana, you will see he's basically out of mana from 4 minutes in. And the amount of mana he gained back from his own abilities was 600,000. Now, when you look at a Mistweaver Monk, and you look at the resources of the Mistweaver Monk, as well as what exactly did he gain back in terms of mana, that's 5.5 million. Yeah, that's the TLDR as to what is making Mistweaver Monk strong in the beta. And if you're not aware about the numbers in the beta, which are gotten quite higher compared to Dragonflight, you have about 2.5 million mana, which means that this Monk's tool, the reworked Mana Tea, is giving you 2 full mana bars extra in an 8-minute fight. That's the same even in our own testing when you look at a Shaman, which is, notoriously pretty good at conserving mana thanks to Resurgence. In this 8-minute fight, that was 1 million mana back from Resurgence, and then you compare this to the mana back of a Monk, and that's 4 million mana, barely even dropping below 50% mana on an 8-minute fight, right? That is very, very good, and a very good way to continue to have good healing throughout the fight by simply having enough mana to actually cast things. Because besides that, Mistweaver has not changed a lot. There haven't been many major changes, and that's the main reason why it's doing well right now. Now we go into the complete opposite. Instead of talking about the best one being Mistweaver, we are talking about the worst one, which has been overall Restoration Druid. Now, Restoration Druid, if we said not much is changing for Mistweaver, well, even less is changing for Restoration Druid. You would struggle to look at this and realize this is from the new expansion, right? You would probably go, what is this? What is Dream Bloom? That's about the only way that would make you realize this Regio Wildgrowth Grove Guardians isn't just what you're doing right now in Dragonflight. And that's because, of course, this is the Keeper of the Grove hero talent for Resto. That's because the Wildstalker is practically the bleed dot extra damage for Mythic Plus kind of hero talent. So you're basically stuck playing with Keeper of the Grove, which unfortunately for those who don't enjoy this, it's even more into playing with your Grove Guardians 3-ends, essentially. But the rest of the talent tree, practically compared to the live version, has remained almost unchanged, and you play practically the same way as you are now. Now, you are already not particularly strong. On top of that, as we mentioned, pretty much all the other healers are having mana problems, and so are you. Just like the others, you are so desperate, you even have to start trying to play with Master Shapeshifter to even give you yourself some kind of mana regen outside of Innervate. Your hero talent is practically the most boring out of all of the healers. You have a bunch of petals spawned by the Grove Guardians, which do some extra healing, and then you have passive flat healing increase, further healing increase on your Grove Guardians. Your Grove Guardians give you healing increase, your healing spells give you more Dream Petals for more passive healing, so it's not even anything very interactive whatsoever, plus your talent tree isn't even changing that much. So overall, even in terms of changes in playstyle, Resto Druid was like the worst out of all of the healers in the beta. Now, above them though, the two other consistent worst performers across all of the bosses tested were Discipline and Holy Priest. Now, the simplest case amongst these two healers is probably Holy, because most Holy Priests right now are pretty happy with the way your new build around your Halo, about your expanding and then returning and then expanding and returning and expanding and returning Halo, which is very powerful. It's actually a very strong ability added to your repertoire as a healer. It is becoming easily your particularly strongest heal ability right now. Whenever you pop it, this spike is quite visible in terms of healing increase. And then the rest of your build, the rest of your talents are practically the same. Nothing really is changing for Holy Priest. So it's just the addition of Archon and nothing else. So in the case of Holy Priest, is mostly a numerical issue, in the sense that the spec plays fine, plays similar to last expansion. You have an extra, and rather than something way more passive and boring like the Resto Druid, you actually now have a proper extra cooldown even as a Holy Priest, which also has very good synergy because it also increases the healing received by allies by 10%, so you can heal more with the rest of your toolkit. It gives you more constant surges of light as this is going in and out. And even for your Mythic Plus, although it's not much, you do have a second crowd control in the form of a repeating Psychic Scream after 4 seconds. So it's not really that bad in terms of playstyle and in terms of power of your hero talent. It's mostly just that the numbers right now are a bit undertuned across the other abilities you are using. A lot of it is focusing more because of the amount of surge of lights you're getting in using way more flash heals, but you know, at the end of the day, flash heal is still a single target ability in a raid, so it cannot be healing for that much. But it is mostly, in the end, more of a numerical issue when it comes to Holy Priest. For Discipline, it's a bit more complicated. Number one, Discipline historically is a harder spec to test in the beta because you need to understand the fight more. You need to understand your ramp and your rotation more when you play Discipline. So you don't get the same results in the beta and in the testing that you would in a normal raiding environment already. But besides that, the main issues centering Discipline is that, number one, the tier set when it comes to Discipline is practically broken, in the sense that the 4-piece set bonus, which is supposed to give you an extra burst of healing whenever you finish your ramp and start doing damage, practically cannot work, because you can't really find a way to use 3 smites before your Mind Blast during your ramp. And you can't use your 3 smites before you even start ramping, because the ramp includes Power War Shield, which would consume the 4-piece set bonus that you want to save for Mind Blast. So it's an awkward situation when it comes to the 4-piece of Discipline. But more than that, more than just the 4-piece thing, which isn't even supposed to be that powerful, are some other problems around the power inside your burst, which is now even bigger than usual. The gaps in power whenever you're ramping and whenever you are not, they're even stronger now. And also when you are playing with Void Weaver, which has also recently been nerfed in Void Blast doing less damage, but the main issue is that one of the bigger finishers is the final point Collapsing Void, which is the fact that the more you do damage with Penance, the larger this becomes, and then by the end of the Rift it's going to blow up for a lot of damage, which can be converted into tons of healing. The problem is, this thing lasts for 8 seconds. If you're taking this talent, it's also going to be extended to 11 seconds long, and this timer begins the moment you use your Mind Blast. That's how this is generated. The problem is, most of your healing as a Discipline Priest will be in the first 5 to 6 seconds of your Mind Blast, because after that, you will have lost half of your atonements. Most of your atonements will have already started dropping one after the other, which means by the time the explosion actually comes, you have lost a bunch of atonements, and this is not going to be converted into healing to nearly as many players as you would have wanted. That is another one of the timing issues of the Discipline Priest rotation right now, on top of the issue of their 4-piece set bonus. And then on top of that, yes, like Holy Priest, it does have some lower numbers compared to other healers. Even if you consider all of these issues, the overall healing of Discipline is still slightly too low. We have to still wonder whether or not the change to Rapture was a good idea, rather than turning this into an actual ramp cooldown where you can use practically only Power Shield to start your ramp. Now it only covers 3 Power Shields instead of 8 or 9, so it does also make it more awkward to have good ramps as a Discipline Priest. So these were the main issues concerning Discipline. They are more targeted compared to Holy Priest, which is just increase their healing by like 15% and they're good. For Discipline, you need to fix a few other more specific things. Now, we can't say much, as we mentioned, about Holy, because as said, as you can see by the top HPSs in here, it was just the Dawn Light Holy Paladin Talent 3 doing most of the heavy work. And most of this has been nerfed. But it's definitely better, even if we don't talk about how powerful it was, but just about how it plays. Yeah, okay, looking at the casts, you know, it looks like we still have a problem, because we are still practically pressing 2 buttons, right? The change is that now the second button you're pressing is Eternal Flame, which, to those who don't know, it's Word of Glory. It's the Dawn Light Holy Paladin upgraded version of Word of Glory, which is just a big single target heal, and on top of that also a heal over time over 20 seconds. Even with the extra help Blizzard tried to give to the other spender, because your Light of Dawn doesn't get upgraded like Word of Glory does, like for example giving Light of Dawn only 10% more crit, or giving Light of Dawn an extra hot for 4 seconds, that was still not enough. Paladins were just still only bothering with these 2 buttons. Spam a ton of Holy Shocks and then dump your Holy Power with Eternal Flame as a spot heal. That's how they were doing well in terms of healing, thanks to the free healing of your Herald of the Sun hero talent. Now what we are left with practically are the 2 in the middle, the Preservation Evoker and the Restoration Shaman. Now, Preservation Evoker, if we have to go for one type of praise, right now is practically the one healer that can play both hero talents just as good. That would be their perk right now, because we have found right now multiple results for Preservation, both as Chrono Warden but also as Flame Shaper, using either the Engulf extra burst healing ability, or very simply going for Chrono Warden and the passive extra bonus healing around your Living Flame ability. So you can have a build which gets more healing from Living Flame and from the Chrono Flame effect, and then you continue to play as normal. You just go for things like spamming or using as much as you can your Echoes and your Temporal Anomaly, and then using your Dream Breath or your Spirit Bloom as your main sources of, carpet AoE healing on the group. Or you can go the other way and play around the Engulf and then the explosion, so to speak, of the Engulf consuming Fire Breath or Dream Breaths to heal targets. This one does play more around Emerald Blossom, mostly because you gain less value around playing with Echo and Temporal Anomaly and spreading tons of value with Dream Breath, because you just want to consume it anyways in the first place with the Engulf mechanic of Preservation Evoker. So it plays off better going around Emerald Blossom. So it is a pretty good situation for Evoker right now. Their healing has been pretty decent to quite good. They have the same problems as mentioned as the others, which is mana. So they have mana issues way more compared to something like Mistweaver, but their healing is solid, plus they have 2 distinct builds playing around 2 hero talents. So if we had to go for a best healer in terms of variety and in terms of diversity right now, in terms of how viable their different builds and different hero talents are, then the winner would definitely be Preservation Evoker. Now, possibly we have the opposite now, with the last one being Restoration Shaman. Now, Restoration Shaman's results were still close to Preservation Evoker, practically the 2 specs below Mistweaver and Holy. They have same issues, possibly even more issues than the other 2 specs over here, which is mana. It's even bigger a problem for a Shaman. Their results might have been even stronger in the beta if they were actually allowed to play with Cloudburst Totem, which was bugged for a long time in the beta, so Shamans had to give up on the totem and just play with the passive Healing Stream totem instead. Now, unlike what we just said about Evoker, this is not the case at all for Resto Shaman, where Farseer is proper terrible. It's totemic the way to go right now as a hero talent for Resto Shaman, which is also very powerful. Just the fact that now you get Healing Rain instant, meaning you save cast time for Healing Rain practically, because this ability itself is also instant, so practically you no longer have to hard cast Healing Rain again in this mode. You also get back arguably the strongest of the tier sets or legendary powers a Shaman has ever had, which is Lively Totem, which is instacast chain heals whenever you put down one of your strong healing totems, as well as the final buff of the Whirling Element effects whenever you put down the Surging Totem. The mana expenditure is still very high because Chain Heal is still a quite mana hungry ability, and now you get tons of buff effects for your Chain Heal, whether it is from Whirling Elements, whether it is from your Ancestral Reach, whether it is from Tidebringer, whether it is from High Tide, whether it is from Unleash Life. You have tons of ways to consume buffed up Chain Heals, and when you don't have any buffed up Chain Heals, if you don't want to spend too much mana, you can substitute Chain Heal for the much more mana efficient Healing Wave, which is about 5 times more efficient than Chain Heal, or you can keep spamming your Chain Heal and just not bother too much about Healing Wave if mana is not an issue. That is pretty much the main concern when it comes to the results of Resto Shaman. The still very high amount of power put exclusively into Chain Heal. Doesn't mean you are, exclusively spamming Chain Heal. You are still going to be casting a lot of Riptides as well, not just Chain Heal anyways. And if you want to conserve more mana, you're also going to be casting Healing Wave a lot. So you're not going to become a Chain Heal machine regardless, even though a lot of your healing will still be about Chain Heal. And the other concern, much like most other healers, is the amount of mana you are spending. After that, we would have to go into something we have already been complaining about for Shaman, which is, for example, things like their lack of defensives, etc, etc, but this is not the time for complaining about that as well. So that's the overall current state of the healers, ranging from pretty good state and satisfying state like Preservation Evoker or even Mistweaver Monk to a good state in terms of results. Good states in terms of power, but with a few cracks here and there that should be addressed. Situations that don't look good on paper, but a slight number increase would make things quite more acceptable, and others that would require a few more precise changes like Discipline. Other situations a bit more depressing due to how static and unchanged the spec is going to be, going from one expansion to the next, and down to the final, work in progress one due to the amount of nerfs received, meaning we have to wait a bit more. This new upcoming week, we're gonna have more testing in the raid, for example, and Mythic Plus still as well. So we will be able to see the results of the post-nerf Holy Paladin. But for now, these were the pretty much situations of the healers in the beta, how they are shaping up for the release of the next expansion. With this out of the way, we can now leave each other to the remainder of the weekend this Sunday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to everyone who is supporting, as well as everyone who is supporting for free by liking and commenting down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yeah, I know, I have to go out. It's like raining, but I don't really want to use my bike, so I'm gonna be walking, I'm afraid.